life and confidence coach Dianna Leeder, and this is my podcast, the Crave More Life Roadshow. It's here we talk about emotional hits and lovingly kicking our own asses to get through them. Just so you know, it always comes down to being your beautiful, sassy self, living and loving from you, no matter what. So join me to hear about the healing journeys of other women, and you just might become a DIY ass kicker too. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Roadshow for another interview with the men of the men's book, Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 4, Transcendent Men, Real Stories. Today I'm talking with Mark J Platten, mentor, coach, master instructor, and child of nature. You'll find Mark's full bio in the show notes. So welcome, Mark. Very, very honored that you're here and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to it as well.
Great. So let's just jump right into the deep end. Okay. So because I'm curious about how you define transcendence.
It's a really good question. I know it's something that several of the men in the book have kind of struggled with, saying, well, I'm not transcendent. What's that even mean? For me, it is, I guess my definition of it would be that I am doing the inner work which is where, for me, everything happens anyway. So the transcending myself over and over again. And I love what Ken Wilber talks about, because oftentimes we think about transcendence, it means we're going away from or out or letting go of where we're from. For me, Ken Wilber talks about transcend and include. So that doesn't mean it's kind of like you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's that that you take the part of you that was before, and you evolve into the next better version of yourself, including all those past selves, if you will. So it's not like we let go of and all of a sudden I'm somewhere else, without the parts of me, the good, the bad, the ugly that was there before. It's about including those because it's gotten me to where I am, and reminding myself of the of that inner journey and the outward journey, but really connecting in with that. So the transcendence is not just a jumping away and stepping outside of this physical realm that we call our life. It is reinventing myself on the inside, making a better version of myself, but including all those other components that are there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that because yes, we can't just leave our history or our trauma or anything. We can't just kind of leave that behind. It was part of us. It happened to us. But yes, if we integrate the learning from it, then we can be something more.
Well, I would even challenge a little bit on that, saying I lived for a part of my time for months at a time, probably 6 or 8 months, where I was really just so involved in the spiritual journey of things, of shamanic journey, of breath work, of rites, rituals, ceremonies, of connecting in nature, that everything else kind of went away. But then, of course, I didn't attend jobs, I didn't pay bills, and relationships started to feel like, oh, I can't just jump out there. That's not healthy either. There's consequences for that. So as much as it was kind of an escapism to some degree, it wasn't healthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I think I heard you say earlier was that you brought the learning with you. I mean, whatever you became spiritually was who showed up to do that. And had done that work, which
Sure.
yeah, which I think is really. I think it's a really good point that you made, that we don't just kind of flip a switch and we become somebody else for those exact reasons as well. Yeah. I like to think of transcendence as getting to a point where you find your voice, um, relative to be able to speak of who you really are, who your wholeness is, you know, um, which is why this book fit for me,
Sure.
this topic. Yeah, yeah. So, not to give away the whole story because we want somebody to go and read the book, but tell me a little bit about your path to transcendence and what's different now for you.
Well, like I said, I'm still on my path to transcendence, and it's always again trying to, or just staying open to the conversation of spirit. So my path. I mean, I grew up on trying. You cut me off because that can be a little bit verbose here. So cut me off. My story gets too wound into there, revealing too much. How about that?
Okay.
So yeah, I grew up. Yeah, I had to laugh when you were doing. I forgot what I put in there as the introduction. I put in there purebred pig farmer, a Norwegian pig farmer. Probably it's the thing I tell people when they ask me who I am. Oftentimes, like I'm a purebred Norwegian pig farmer. So I grew up on a pig farm in Iowa. So I'm going to write a book somewhere down the road, kind of with that theme in it. What I learned as a purebred Norwegian pig farmer. And anyway, I grew up on a farm, and it was a deep relationship to nature that really called me into that. It, it was a relationship I didn't even know I had because I was immersed. It's like being in that fishbowl, right? You don't know you're in water. I was in the water, if you will, of spirit, of connection with the land. I communicated with my animals. The land spoke to me, and I just thought everybody had that and knew that and was there. Um, and so that was growing up in that and just being out in nature and being drawn into that deep relationship as a child. As I moved into kind of my into the later years of high school and then into college and then into my empire building. I kind of laid that down for a bit until kind of I stumbled across or into it and back into the connection with nature again. And it's like everything came fresh back into me of like, oh, this stuff was real. It wasn't make believe. It wasn't pretend. It wasn't this. So for me, um, nature continues to be my sacred place to go. I can tell when I haven't been out in it that my energy shifts and I start getting drained and I'm maybe a little erratic or the static of the brain or such. I actually go into it to kind of rejuvenate and replug and then clear. Um, so I know when I've been too busy at work or too busy doing other things, too busy with working at the house or doing family obligations or whatever it may be, that I've got to pull away and have still alone connected time in nature.
Mhm.
So I'll keep it at that, but it's been a journey. I've had a lot of really interesting connections that I think still lead from my early childhood days. Um, where I still, spirit still talks to me, nature still talks to me, the animals sometimes, but I've got my own wounding from some of that, that I've shut down some of that pathway. But yeah, and it's kind of juxtaposed against my other side, which is, I've got an undergrad in math, computer science, and business, a triple major there. I've got another undergrad in natural resources. I've got an MBA in organizational management. I've spent the last 14 years working for Colorado State University as faculty. So it's this interesting juxtaposition of the spiritual realm, which many people are like woo woo, make believe, that's not really happening, against the scientific, fact. I can prove it, I can, replicate it, and so on. So it's an interesting world that I kind of dance between with that.
Hmm. Very interesting. Yes, you're right. I mean, there are two different camps in some way. And being able to bring those together, especially in the work that you're doing, is fantastic. Yeah. So what, how, because the whole concept of transcendence brings that image of different, of change, as we sort of danced around earlier. So
Mm-hmm.
what 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 is different for you? What did were there things that were meaningful before that are no longer, but things that are meaningful now that weren't before, or what was that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Diane, the I mean, I guess the question becomes from when? Are you talking about early childhood or when I was building my mega empire when I was a U.S. Air Force officer? or I mean, so things change. I guess for me, when I was building the empire, if you want to call it that, um, it felt really important that money was important, that prestige was important, that power was important, that, you know, there's still a part of me that my ego really likes that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I find myself in jobs and so forth that kind of have that kind of edge of prestige to it, and so forth. But I think I'm hoping I'm letting a bit of that go and surrendering away from the ego. And I don't want to get rid of the ego. I think I think it's the Dalai Lama that talks about that you've got to have ego so that you can let it go. So, and then there's a whole other story with that
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself, that a deep wisdom that comes from that, of understanding the ego has a purpose. And so I'm working with to let go a little bit of that ego side, because I've got a healthy portion of that, and surrendering a little bit more to myself and to what my place of service. And then that's, I guess that would be the furthest truth that I can say right now, is that a lot of my journey has been very solo, very individual, very inward looking and outward looking, but in the spiritual, more spiritual-esque realms. And now I'm really getting the call to be more in service, which takes a really a different look. So how do I show up in service? So part of this is being in service right now, right? I'm showing up, I'm sharing with you and with whomever is going to watch this down the road. And so how can I be more in service? And it's an interesting change inside myself, um, of going, it's not about me. It's not about me. Where am I being called to serve? How am I being called to serve? And can I surrender to that?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So we won't talk about how large the ego was before and what's changed now, but that's a really good that's a really good comparison, because when we, when our ego is driving us to do one thing, and the heart calls something else, then there has to be um, some kind of transition or some kind of movement to incorporate what we need in that moment. And it sounds like yours is, doing your own work ego wise, but also being in service, which is really what you've done with this book, I think.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So, one of the things that I remember you saying when we talked about you being part of this book was about, the things that are most important to you, and the one thing that really stuck with me was your commitment to family and human connection. So, tell me a little bit about that in comparison to what it was like when you were building your empire. I mean, I can't imagine that you were, that those things weren't important to you, but for me, that's a lot of what happens when we do that inner work and we shift into doing what is really, really valuable to us, to our hearts.
Yeah, it's that family component. Since I can remember back to when I was 3, maybe 4, but I'm thinking it was 3 years old. This I heard something on whatever radio. I mean, it wasn't much going on at that time. Whatever was going on in the, whatever radio was playing in the hog buildings. And it's funny that my dad did that, but he had the radios playing in there because they must have read something that it soothed them, which it does. But nonetheless, I heard something that talked about, if you could see the white of your nails, that little moon in there, then you had a higher percentage of having a family and getting married. It was I'm not sure where it was from and what that, but in my little kid mind, it's like, I know I'm going to have a family this lifetime. I know I'm going to have children. I know I'm going to be a father, and I'm going to do this. It's going to be a sacred journey for me. And um, so that's really what happened. So I was doing all this empire building and stuff. And I talk about this in one of the other collaborative books with Laura that we've done with Brave Healers there. Talk about how I had this lost in the stock market. So if you've ever seen The Wolf of Wall Street, I was on the receiving end of the Leonardo DiCaprio kind of taking everything and crashing everything down around. So I lost about just under $400,000 25 years ago in the stock market. And during that time frame, shortly after that, um, I found out I was pregnant with my first child, and so my world of kind of doing my own spiritual stuff by myself and doing this empire building and everything shifted to being a father and showing up and being really making that my sacred walk, really making that my purpose, my passion, my drive, and making sure I was there and finding, it wasn't about my work being the primary thing anymore. It was about the family. So I would choose jobs that would keep me able to be there for all my kids' activities. If they were sick, I could go and get them. Luckily, I have a wife who's very supportive of that as well. And she also, I mean, we were a really great team, um, where we both had flexible jobs and have had flexible jobs so we could be there for the kids whenever we needed to be. And I knew that that was on my life path from very early on, and I feel like I did as good a job as I could. And I'm still parenting. I mean, you never stop that. But our youngest is now he'll be 20 here in a couple of weeks, and he's a junior, just wrapping up his junior year at Colorado State University where I work. So I feel like there's a next chapter coming where we've gotten them to be all to their adult self. And it's like, there's a breath, there's an opportunity what this next chapter looks like. And so I'm leaning into that right now, kind of switching gears into that next phase of family still being incredibly important. In fact, my wife and I were just talking about this again last night, that it's funny how we kind of have, I don't want to say insulate ourselves, but we both fall into leadership positions. So wherever we go, so we tend to be on the top of the food chain to some degree, and then we've got all the people who work with and for us underneath that, and we kind of keep a separate, just a little bit of separation between that, just for to be able to do what you need to do sometimes in leadership, which are not the fun things. So we've kind of focused a lot of our energy back on family, which means the next phase for me anyway, and for us, is about finding relationships with other people and building the friendship kind of pool. And what does that look like, and how does that change? So we're in that kind of phase of what's next. And I'm interested to see how that unfolds, and I'm excited about it. We're looking at doing some world travel, maybe even I'd really like to live in other countries and kind of get an outside perspective. We've done a lot of world travel, but never lived outside that. So really curious about where that will take us.
Mm. That's a really exciting time, and I certainly relate to, when your kids have gotten to the point where you don't have to be there for them 24/7, like when they're all at home. And I think you have 5 sons.
We
Yeah,
do.
yeah, awesome.
5 sons.
So yeah, you've put in your time. That's for sure, and I'm sure that they're amazing kids. Um, so when thinking about the fact that you do have 5 sons, and I want to come back to your transition a little bit, but
Hmm.
thinking about those 5 sons, what's that maybe the most important thing that you have imparted to them so that they will be living as whole as they care to be?
That's a good question. What have I imparted with them? I think as much as anything is just to listen and to invite them to think of themselves as a holy sacred being, that their self-talk determines where they're going to go. As far as they can have all the skills in the world, but if that internal voice is saying, I'm a horrible person, I'm bad, I don't have this, I don't have that, I'm not this, I'm not that, then it's very, very challenging to um, to reach your potential, whatever that may be in the world, and to find joy and happiness. I mean, that's what we want for our children.
Agreed.
Is that is really for them to find their bliss and connection. And when that internal voice is negative, is talking down to you with that, and telling you how bad you are and whatever it is, that's hard to move past that phase. So it's constantly talking about this, about being aware and consciousness, and being there and letting them know that, that we all fail, whatever that is. And then we all start over. And if you get it, once you get enough life behind you, you understand that the lows are only there for so long and the highs are only there for so long. And to enjoy the highs when they're there and celebrate them, and really be in present moment no matter where you are, and also in the low points, knowing that that too will pass. And that gives, at least for me, it gives me the I guess, gives me the energy and the wherewithal to kind of just stick with it, knowing that if I keep doing my work, and it's oftentimes that internal work, right? We create our reality oftentimes, and we have choice. I guess that's the best thing, is that we have choice.
Yeah.
And then we're always able to have, no matter what our situation is, we have a choice in that. And with that choice comes a particular power, right? Because that means we're in charge of our destiny with life. And even if it's a bad choice, recognize that I'm still choosing that. And that's okay then, right? That means I'm still in charge with that. And I'm navigating my ship instead of being just wandering out in the ocean without a rudder of any kind, or without a wind or a sail to drive me somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and I agree. I mean, as a parent and just as a human, that we really do need to take responsibility for our experiences, good or bad, because they all become learning for us anyway. They really do, and they teach us something for the next time. That we need to make a choice. And making conscious decisions is, I think, a really powerful place to sit in our wholeness. Yeah, awesome. So I love that. Yeah. So back to that transition a little bit.
Okay.
What you're connected to spirit, and I know that you're doing men's work. So what is spirit telling you? What's that guidance?
Like right now, right in this very moment.
Oh,
So
well,
no,
sure.
I don't mean literally right this very moment, but in this kind of present
You could have,
state.
yeah, you could have gone there too. That would have been okay. We're pretty free on this show, but yes.
Excellent. Um, right now, interestingly enough, like I was talking with you before we started this interview here, is that I'm doing 4 books this year with Braveheart, productions there. And so it's interesting. I hadn't anticipated that was going to be the case. It started with our trip to Teotihuacan in January, where we're doing the Shaman Heart book, um, and doing ceremonial stuff there. And that was I'm writing a story about that right now for Amy Gillespie's book series, The Ancestors Within stuff. So, but that kind of launched that piece. And right now, what's interesting is I had a download dream that came through, and spirit woke me up, I will say about 4 o'clock in the morning, just started dumping stuff on me. And for like 2 hours straight, I couldn't get back to sleep because it kept like, and this, and this, and this, and this. So in the strangest of ways, just like we talked about, that for you to write a book about men is like kind of this weird thing, that it's not in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Really, it's not what you've ever done. You've worked with women your whole, I'm guessing, for a fair amount of your adult career with stuff.
Yes.
um, what I've been kind of tapped to work on is, what came down is, to me, is it's not what you eat but how you eat that matters. And it's not a diet book. It's a, how do we relate to the food and to our bodies in a sacred spiritual way that then changes everything about this relationship. So if we hate our food, if we hate our bodies, if we hate, then how possibly can a physical being respond? I mean, so we're energetic beings, and the information that we're sending it is bad body, bad food, and I'm putting this bad food in this bad body, and then anticipating and hoping against all odds that this is going to change somehow. And it doesn't work that way. This is why I love the statement of, this is why 95% of the diets fail us. We don't fail them. They
Mm.
fail us because it's coming from, again, like much of our Western medicine, it's a band-aid effect, right? So yeah, you can do any of the fad diets that are coming around or whatever it is, and most of them will drop you, 10, 15 pounds or whatever it is in the short term, but it's a sacrifice that we're not happy doing. that doesn't feed our soul, that we're not listening to our bodies and what our body actually need. We're not doing the inner subconscious work to help release some of those old blockages. We're not making it a sacred act of the food we eat and connecting with it and bringing it into this temple, into this vehicle, in this amazing vehicle that we have that is moving us across in a physical way across the planet. Um, and so it's so fascinating that this is what's been kind of put into my lap. And so I'm getting ready to launch a um, a course, actually a 7-week course on this, and it's going to be a founders course because I want to go through it first with a group of a small group of 20 to 25 people to kind of work on it and go, is this the right amount of this? Should we maybe add another block or another lesson here, another module here, another week's worth or whatever it is, or what are we missing here? Is it too much, too little of that? So
Yes.
I'm going to be launching that really here in the next few weeks, actually. So that's
Awesome.
what's on my plate right now.
Thank you, thank
As
you, thank you.
strange, as strange as that may, I mean, for me, it's like, what am I doing? This has nothing, but it's like, it's one of those things when I have, when I have these kind of connections, I don't even say kind of, absolute connections with the divine, with the sacred, I pay attention to that, and I know when it's, when it's the difference between spirit and ego can be very fine. It's a discernment, but ego is always about look how great I am, look how wonderful I am, and some to some degree with that, and that's not a bad thing, right? Because I think that's important to have that. Um, Spirit is more subtle to me, and it's like pay attention to this. This is something that you could do, and it's
Mhm.
never an absolute, but oftentimes when it comes and shares stuff with me, I pay attention to it and sometimes even argue with it, which is there's a whole nother story in that about how my wife Ariana and I came together. um, and I was supposed to, well, maybe I'll jump into it for just real quickly, but I was
Sure.
supposed to be doing a Native American a ceremonial dance. I'd been it's called the Buffalo Dance, and I'd been preparing for a couple of years, and I was going to a different ceremony prior to that, an event, a week long event, and so I was going to spend the first Wednesday, Thursday, and then leave on Friday to go to this Buffalo Dance. And I got there this event, and I was out meditating, and spirit came like, you are not to leave this event. It's like, are you kidding me? I've been preparing for this other one for 2 years. It's like, you are not. And I was angry. I was like, I was arguing with spirit, and it kept telling me, you're not, you need to stay here, you need to stay here. And there's a whole other story that goes with it, but eventually I met my wife Ariana, and the rest is history. And so,
Wow.
and I
Wow.
not listened to that, who knows, maybe we would have met up somewhere else, but she was in Texas at the time and I was here in Colorado. So she just happened to be up at this event, for against all odds in her own story with that. So it was very serendipitous about how we came together, and then arguing with spirit, telling, um, led to some amazing things. And almost always trusted. I try to fight it sometimes. My ego wants to get in the way, right, of doing this. So I'm kind of surrendering into this whole thing about not what you eat, but how you eat that matters, kind of thing that I would typically
Mm.
stay a million miles away from.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued with it, and just trusting. I'm just trusting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I can relate to the, the downloads in the middle of the night where, where you're just awake. You're going to be awake and, grab a pen.
Right.
Anything for me, it's my phone that because if I turn on the light, then I'm going to wake up my husband. So, yeah,
I
you
go into the
have to.
bathroom. I go
Oh,
to the bathroom, and that's my chamber of writing, my workspace. Because I can close the doors and turn the light on, so there's just a little bit of light under the door frame. But yeah,
yeah. Well, you do what you got to do, right?
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I would know. If I don't write it down right then, I don't remember in the morning. So, yeah, I
Right.
need to do that too. Um, so yes, when you get those, it's interesting because yes, we are when we're given something that different. As me doing a men's book, you getting into some of the eating habits, our eating habits. They're different. They're so different that it's not something that we would easily jump into. But I really love that trust, and I know that that's really very very true for me too. And I think for most people, once we get to that point of just trusting, and that's part for me. That's part of, and I'm sure it is for you too. That's part of identifying your purpose. You know, if that's what you are meant to do, if that's what you're meant to offer, if you have those skills, then be there, do that. So I love that.
Yeah, and for me, it's that aspect again of this isn't like the only time I mean, like I said, it's a lifelong communication that's been going on, a dialogue, if you will. It's not one way; it's a dialogue. Um, and because I've nurtured that and trusted it and engaged with it and paid attention to it and journaled about it and opened myself. And it's really, for me, the connection with spirit is not an outward dynamic masculine kind of trait. It's more of a feminine, receptive, softening down, opening up to receive. So I can become the vessel of a better, where I can communicate better, hear better, sense better, smell better, hear whatever it is that when it comes in, that I'm a better receiver for that. So it's not like something I'm just like, oh, this is the only time this has ever happened kind of thing, and I'm just going to jump into it. It's like, no, I understand that when it's doing this, that it's again, it's different than a dream. That's the a dream that has really no purpose other than cleansing out the brain and rewiring a few things. I understand there's a difference there. I understand when I hear something come through, is it my own self-talk or is it coming from the sacred, holy, divine? Although you can argue that my own self-talk is my own sacred, self-divine self talking to myself.
That's another
But
show.
that's a whole nother show. But yeah, yeah. So it's been
Yeah,
good.
cool. I'm really I'm looking forward to seeing what you put out relative to that new program. Yeah, I think that would be really, really interesting. I think it's an important place to go. You know, we don't just, sometimes what we're looking for doesn't come back to us in our food or our choices in that way. So yeah, very,
Right.
very interesting. So I have one last question for you, and that is, what are your hopes for this book?
Oh, my hopes for this book. I mean, it's always, I love when men get together to do men's work. This is men's work for me. This is, um, unfortunately, let's back up a bit, I guess. For me, as young boys, we tend to pack together with other young boys. I mean, it's just a nat. I mean, the testosterone, even running them, the high energies. We fight, we wrestle, we play, we walk around with our arms over each other's shoulders. That is totally acceptable and encouraged and stuff. And then all of a sudden, as we move into that men arena and into the relationship with whomever the other might be, then all of a sudden, this, at least in our culture, there's a lot of cultures where it's still very acceptable for men to walk around, hand in hand with each other, to embrace each other, sitting on each other's laps. Very acceptable. It's still today in several cultures around the world. But in our Western culture, we take this very deep, rich connection to other boys as young boys and young men, and it all of a sudden becomes taboo to be in physical connection, to share what's going on in our interior world. And what I have found is that when men do this with other men, when we can be vulnerable, when we create that sacred, safe space with one another, that the magic happens there, that, oh, we don't have to be the lone wolf, we don't have to do this by ourselves. And it's not a failure to say, hey, this is going on for me. It's actually that letting go of that weight that we got a bag of wounds that we're carrying with us everywhere we go, and being told that that's what men do, and if you don't do that, then you're not successful, you're not a real man, or whatever it may be with that. And so every time we take one of those items out of our bag and share it with the rest of the world to kind of observe, and the feedback they get is, wow, I feel that too, brother. I feel that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share myself as well, because it's an invitation, right? It's that invitation to go, oh, I got it. You're doing something that we're not supposed to be able to do, and you're doing this. Now that gives me permission to do it as well, which means not only do I heal from that, not only do I loosen or lessen the weight that I'm carrying behind me in that bag, but I'm also giving the invitation and giving the openness for others to do the same. And it's magical when that happens. And so I'm as I read through, like I said, I'm not quite through. I've got another 7 or 8, I think, chapters to read in our book here. But as I read through it, I resonate with the men who are writing and sharing from their soul of some of the pain that are the atrocities that humanity puts upon each other with that, parents and society and so forth, what we can do to each other is just beyond suffering sometimes. And I'm reading this and the vulnerability that the men are able to do or be able to share with this, and it I have just great love for each of them, and the desire and willingness to connect and to just embrace in that brotherhood. So I'm really excited about this. I love when men are able to do things that we're not supposed to do.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. And that's a really good way to wind that up. Yeah, things that they don't think that they're supposed to do. Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly, yeah, I'm getting that same sense out of all the chapters, and really is a great purpose for this book. If somebody else can
Yes.
pick it up and say, look at that, look what so and so was able to do. I think maybe I can take a step in that direction too and connect. Yeah, love that. Cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here. I appreciate you being part of this book. I am loving it. Of course, it won't be out till August, but I'm loving it, and yes, as well, I'm really honored that everybody has put their stories down on paper and for the world to read and learn from. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you as well. Appreciate it.
Mm. And listeners, thank you for showing up today. That's much appreciated too. And even if you just simply learned one little tidbit, that's awesome. You showed up, and by doing that, you are kicking your own ass. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time. If you like today's podcast, hit subscribe at the bottom on your way out, and come find me at cravemorelife.com for even more DIY ass kicking.